The morning fog rolled thick across the Appalachian ridgeline, carrying with it the kind of silence that makes seasoned soldiers uneasy. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen crouched behind a fallen oak tree, his rifle scope scanning the valley below, where his patrol had been pinned down for the last 3 hours. The enemy had them surrounded, positioned strategically along the Kentucky mountainside, with superior numbers and firepower. What they didn't know was that 2 miles away, perched on an impossible ledge that most would consider unreachable, someone was watching. Someone they had written off as just another washed-up veteran who couldn't cut it in the field anymore. They were about to learn how wrong assumptions could be. Sarah Mitchell had been monitoring the radio chatter from her position on Eagle's Peak since dawn. The 42-year-old former Marine Corps sniper had officially retired 3 years ago, after an injury that the brass claimed would end her career. The shrapnel from an IED explosion in Afghanistan had damaged her left shoulder, reducing her mobility and, according to the medical board, her effectiveness in combat situations. They had offered her a desk job, a comfortable position training recruits at Quantico. She had declined, choosing instead to work as a civilian contractor for special operations, a role that most of her former colleagues viewed as a step down from her legendary status. The radio crackled with increasing desperation. Chen's voice cut through the static, reporting casualties and dwindling ammunition. His patrol, part of a joint training exercise that had gone catastrophically wrong when they encountered actual hostile forces, was trapped in a kill zone with no viable escape route. The nearest backup was 40 minutes away, and from the sound of the gunfire echoing through the mountains, they didn't have 40 minutes. Mitchell adjusted her position on the rocky outcrop, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her shoulder with every movement. Her custom rifle, a modified Barrett M82 that she had personally fine-tuned over years of service, rested steady against the natural rock formation. Through her scope, she could see the enemy positions with crystal clarity. 12 hostiles, well-armed and disciplined, had positioned themselves in a textbook ambush formation along the ridge opposite Chen's location. They were professionals, not the usual rabble that wandered through these mountains. The first hook came through her earpiece as Chen's radio operator, a young corporal named Davis, transmitted what sounded like a final message. His voice shook as he reported that they were down to their last magazine each, and that Sergeant Williams had taken a round to the leg. The enemy was closing in for what appeared to be the final assault, moving with tactical precision down the slope toward the trapped patrol. In 30 seconds, Chen's team would be overrun, and there was nothing conventional military doctrine could do to save them. Mitchell's breathing slowed as she entered the zone that had made her legendary among her peers. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, the crosshairs settling on the lead hostile who was directing the final assault. Range 2,847 meters. Wind northwest at 12 knots, gusting to 15. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit with rising humidity from the morning mist. Variables that would challenge even the most skilled marksman, made more difficult by her compromised physical condition. And the impossible angle she was shooting from. The doubters back at headquarters had been vocal about their concerns regarding Mitchell's continued involvement in active operations. Colonel Morrison, her former commanding officer, had specifically requested that she be kept away from high-stakes missions, citing her injury and what he termed her reckless disregard for protocol. The bureaucrats had listened, relegating her to consultation roles and equipment testing. They saw her as a liability, a former asset whose time had passed. None of them understood that her injury had forced her to adapt, to become more precise, more calculated in her approach. The limitation had transformed her from an excellent sniper into something approaching perfection. Chen's patrol had no idea she was even in the area. The mission briefing had mentioned possible contractor support, but nothing specific about sniper overwatch. As far as they knew, they were on their own, facing overwhelming odds with no hope of rescue arriving in time. The enemy commander, a scarred man in surplus military gear, raised his hand to signal the final advance. His fighters began moving down the slope in a coordinated assault. Confident that the American soldiers below were finished, Mitchell's finger found the trigger as she made final adjustments for the extreme long-range shot. The physics were daunting even under ideal conditions. At nearly 3,000 meters, Her bullet would travel for approximately 4 seconds, dropping over 100 feet due to gravity while fighting crosswinds that could push it several feet off target. Her damaged shoulder made it impossible to maintain the rock-steady position she once could, forcing her to time her shots between the involuntary tremors that the nerve damage caused. The second hook arrived as Davis's voice came through the radio one final time, no longer trying to maintain military composure. He was saying goodbye to someone named Sarah back home, apologizing for promises he wouldn't be able to keep. Chen tried to maintain order, but even his experienced voice betrayed the reality they all faced. In 15 seconds, the enemy would be in position to finish them. The morning that had started as a routine training exercise in the Daniel Boone National Forest was about to end in tragedy. Mitchell's world compressed to the moment between heartbeats. She had made shots like this before, but never under these specific conditions, never with lives hanging in the balance while her own body worked against her. The crosshairs settled on the enemy commander's center mass, and she began her breathing cycle. In, hold, settle, squeeze. The variables aligned for one perfect instant as the wind died and her shoulder steadied. The Barrett roared, sending a .50 caliber round across the impossible distance at over 2,800 feet per second. For 4 eternal seconds, physics and skill battled against distance and conditions. Down in the valley, Chen heard something that made his blood freeze. Not gunfire from the advancing enemy, but a distinct crack echoing off the mountain walls. The sound that every infantry soldier learns to recognize and fear. The sonic boom of a high-powered rifle fired from extreme range. The enemy commander's head exploded in a pink mist that painted the rocks behind him. Before his body hit the ground, Mitchell was already cycling her bolt and acquiring her second target. The hostile fighters froze in confusion, their coordinated advance grinding to a halt as they tried to understand where the shot had come from. They scanned the ridgelines frantically, but Mitchell's position was beyond their visual range, hidden among the rock formations of Eagle's Peak. Chen's patrol watched in amazement as chaos erupted among their attackers. The second-in-command tried to rally his fighters, pointing toward the direction he thought the shot had originated from. Mitchell's second bullet caught him in the chest before he could complete the gesture, dropping him 20 feet down the slope. The sound of her rifle echoed again across the valley, a sound that was beginning to strike terror into the remaining hostiles. What followed was a masterclass in long-range precision shooting. Mitchell worked methodically through the enemy positions, each shot timed perfectly to maximize psychological impact while eliminating tactical threats. She targeted the machine gunner first, silencing the weapon that posed the greatest danger to Chen's patrol. Then the radio operator, cutting off their ability to call for reinforcements. Each bullet found its mark with surgical precision, defying the extreme range and difficult conditions. The remaining hostiles broke formation and began retreating up the opposite slope, abandoning their weapons and equipment in their panic. They had walked into what they thought was a simple ambush against an isolated patrol, only to find themselves being hunted by a ghost who could reach out and touch them from impossible distances. Mitchell let them run, focusing instead on the radio chatter from Chen's position. Relief flooded through the patrol as they realized they were no longer under fire. Chen tried to raise whoever had provided their miraculous rescue, scanning the ridgelines with binoculars in an attempt to spot their guardian angel. All he could see was empty rock and forest, no sign of human presence anywhere within visual range. Davis, still shaking from his brush with death, began checking on the wounded Sergeant Williams, while the rest of the patrol maintained security. Mitchell was already packing her equipment, moving with efficient precision despite the pain in her shoulder. She had learned long ago that the best sniper was one who was never seen, never identified, never credited. The mission was complete, Chen's patrol was safe, and she could disappear back into the anonymity that her retirement had provided. The radio chatter would mention an unknown sniper who had provided critical support, but by the time any official investigation began, she would be miles away. As she prepared to leave her position, Mitchell's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. Colonel Morrison's voice came through the encrypted channel, barely containing his mixture of amazement and frustration. He had been monitoring the situation from headquarters, watching the thermal signatures disappear from his tactical display as Mitchell systematically eliminated the threats. The shots had been tracked by acoustic sensors, revealing the impossible distance and precision of the engagement. Morrison knew immediately who was responsible. Only one sniper in his experience could make those shots under those conditions, and she was supposedly retired due to medical limitations. His voice carried a grudging respect as he transmitted directly to Mitchell's position, acknowledging what she had just accomplished while simultaneously questioning her decision to engage without proper authorization. The bureaucratic machine that had written her off was about to confront the reality of what they had discarded. Mitchell's response was characteristically brief. She reported the successful resolution of the tactical situation and provided coordinates for the abandoned enemy equipment. When Morrison pressed for details about her unauthorized presence in the operational area, she simply noted that she had been conducting routine equipment testing in the National Forest and had responded to a distress call. The technical truth of the statement frustrated Morrison, but he couldn't argue with the results. Down in the valley, Chen's patrol was beginning to process what had just happened. The precision and timing of the shots suggested military-grade training, but the extreme range indicated someone operating at the very highest levels of the profession. Davis calculated the distance to the nearest viable sniper position and came up with numbers that seemed impossible. Even if someone could make those shots, the physical demands of reaching and maintaining such a position would challenge an Olympic athlete, let alone someone carrying the heavy equipment required for long-range precision shooting. Sergeant Williams, despite his leg wound, was the first to voice what they were all thinking. Someone extraordinary had been watching over them, someone with skills that transcended normal military capabilities. Chen found himself wondering about the contractor support that had been mentioned in their briefing, thinking about the kind of person who would be operating alone in these mountains with that level of capability. The evacuation helicopter arrived 30 minutes later, finding Chen's patrol secure and the tactical situation completely resolved. The medic who treated Williams noted that without immediate relief from enemy pressure, the sergeant's wound could have become life-threatening due to blood loss. The pilot reported no visual contact with any other friendly forces in the operational area, adding another layer of mystery to the morning's events. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying the patrol back to their base, Chen caught a glimpse of movement on a distant ridgeline. A figure in tactical gear was rappelling down what appeared to be a sheer rock face, moving with fluid precision despite carrying a substantial equipment load. By the time he raised his binoculars, the figure had disappeared into the tree line, leaving no trace of their presence except for the lives they had saved. The after-action report would generate considerable discussion at headquarters. Morrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of explaining how a supposedly disabled veteran had single-handedly resolved a tactical situation that had threatened to become a catastrophic failure. The medical board that had recommended Mitchell's retirement would face questions about their assessment of her capabilities. The bureaucrats who had relegated her to consulting roles would have to acknowledge the gap between their paperwork and battlefield reality. Mitchell's truck was already winding down the mountain highway by the time the official investigators reached Eagle's Peak. They would find evidence of her presence, spent brass casings and equipment marks in the rock, but she had vanished as completely as morning mist. Her shoulder ached from the morning's exertion, but she felt the deep satisfaction that came from a mission successfully completed, from lives saved through precision and skill. The phone call came that evening, while she was cleaning her rifle in the workshop behind her cabin. Morrison's voice was different now, carrying none of the condescension that had marked their previous conversations. He spoke directly about a new program, one designed for operators who had been written off by conventional assessment methods. The bureaucracy was finally beginning to understand that their limitations were not the same as tactical limitations, that experience and adaptation could sometimes transcend physical specifications. Chen's patrol would return to duty with a story that would become legend among their unit. They would speak of impossible shots and guardian angels, of precision that defied explanation, and timing that suggested divine intervention. But they would never learn the name of the woman who had saved them, never know about her struggle against a system that had tried to discard her, never understand the personal cost of maintaining skills at that level, despite physical limitations. Mitchell's response to Morrison's offer was characteristically measured. She would consider the new program, evaluate whether it represented genuine recognition of her capabilities or just another attempt to manage what the bureaucracy couldn't understand. Her conditions were non-negotiable: operational autonomy, equipment selection, and mission parameters that recognized her unique skill set rather than trying to fit her into conventional roles. The morning fog had lifted completely by noon, revealing the Kentucky mountains in their full autumn glory. Eagle's Peak stood silent and empty, showing no sign of the drama that had unfolded on its heights. Nature had already begun reclaiming the evidence of human presence, wind scattering the loose rocks that had supported a legendary sniper's position. Only the saved lives of Chen's patrol testified to what had transpired in those critical moments when skill, determination, and perfect timing had converged. Years later, when Chen reached the rank of colonel himself, he would often tell the story to young officers who doubted the importance of individual excellence in an age of technological warfare. He would speak of morning fog and impossible shots, of guardian angels who appeared when hope seemed lost. But he would always end with the same observation: never underestimate what the human spirit can accomplish when skill, courage, and determination align in the service of others. Sometimes the most dangerous person on the battlefield is the one everyone else has written off as finished.